So we are live now. Hello everyone. Welcome back to the SOC Analyst live trading series. Today is day 25 and we are continuing our Splunk journey with part 3 of Splunk queries for SOC Analyst. So we are already covered a lot, like 60 queries in part 1 and part 2, 30 queries in part 1 and 30 queries in part 2. So the Splunk basic queries, authentication detection queries, SSH queries, privilege escalation queries, PowerShell activity, DNS tunneling, right, brute force attacks. So these queries was covered. And today also we are covering the rest of the queries I have uh, collected for Splunk. So that makes a total 100 queries for Splunk, which makes you uh, very helpful, which will be very helpful for you, so you can use it in your SOC journey. So this is day 25 and many of you are still joining. So let's wait 1 or 2 minutes. So let them join. And before starting, let me give you some brief insight. So basically we covered some of the queries, like the query to potential lateral movement. So this type of query was covered in the previous session, like lateral movement, and then the just a second. So lateral movement, and then the web application attacks, the query to identify the web application attack, and then the privilege escalation, the accesses, the recurrence activity, the vulnerable services, the email attachments, and further. And today also we are going to discuss some more queries. So this is day 25, and after that we have remaining 5 more sessions in this series. That makes it complete a 30 sessions series, 30-day series. So that 5 remaining parts will be completed in next 5 days, Monday to Friday, from 10th of November to 14th of November. So that then you can prepare your SOCL1 journey. So let me see how many of you are available. Okay. So hello Sai, how are you? So without further delay, let's start. So you are watching this series on Zero Day Vault YouTube channel, and I'm Sumit Jain. So let's start today's session. So this is the 30-day series, and I'm Sumit Jain. This is some brief intro about me. So I have 11 plus of years experience in ethical hacking, VAPT or red team, and then specialization in blue or red team operations, threat detections, or incident response. Right now, my passion is to building the next generation of cybersecurity defenders and professionals. So that's why I launched this particular series. I'm conducting workshops, trainings, and internships for thousands of students and professionals all across India, right? And you can check out my profile on LinkedIn and Telegram. You can join the Telegram or WhatsApp community to connect with me, or if you have any particular doubt, queries, mentorship, anything, any guidance you need, you can contact me over there. So this is part 3, and the first query we have is query to identify the potential DDoS attack. So the DDoS attack, you know about it, like when we using multiple resources on a single target to the launching an attack which makes the traffic very high. So we are basically detecting something like incoming requests on your server, on your applications. So this particular query will highlight the sudden or high volume of incoming requests, the traffic that hitting on a single server, single service, or single IP. from many distributed sources, because we are identifying the DDoS. So we need to check out the distributed sources, because in DDoS the sources will be distributed, but in DOS the single source will be used. So that indicators includes massive connection, like repetitive requests to the same endpoints, protocol floods, like high volume of synchronized requests, high volume of UDP requests, high volume of HTTP requests, high error rates or bandwidth saturations. So you can easily rectify and identify the potential DDoS attack based logs. After that, the query to identify the potential web shell activity. So web shell is like a type of web attack in which the attacker is basically trying to launch a attack in which the motive is to gain a shell access. Because if an attacker somehow gain the shell access, he can execute some command and retrieve or exfiltrate some data from your server. So we are basically identifying some web shell activity. And for that, we have this Splunk query. So source type, access log file, then action is command execution. Any type of command will be executed. So we are basically searching some of the common commands in our log file. So this detection looks for suspicious command executions via web servers, such as HTTP requests invoking OS commands like cmd.executable/bin/sh, file writes to directories, access to rare script files like PHP, ASP, JSPX, like, and then the trigger process is launched. So we are basically identifying everything related to all these things. If any OS command was executed, if any access to some scripting files, the file writes in the web directories. So we are basically identifying all these, and then we can check if the sudden creation of web new files, child processes by spawned by the web server. So that means the attacker is basically planted the web server. So basically they are using it for persistent and remote control. The next query will be the query to identify the potential brute force on a specific network devices. Previously, we talked about the brute force on a web server, on a single web application, on a single IP, on a single port, on a network service. Network is to identifying a network device. So if in your network multiple network devices are used, then you can use this query for selecting the source type of that particular network device to identify the potential brute force attack. The scenario will be same as previous we discussed previously, but the source type will be different, and that's the uh, modified query. So if any type of firewall, routers, VPN appliances, switches, or web you are using in a network, then we can select the source type of that, but pointing out to that network device and identifying some potential brute force attack activity. The next we have is the query to identify the potential privilege escalation attempts on Linux system. So basically we are identifying like the some actions of sudo command, because sudo is basically using to switch the user from or granting the permission to run the command as an root on local user, right? So we are basically identifying some actions like that. So this detection basically focuses on user attempting to elevate their privileges through sudo su or set uid binaries. So if you are familiar with the Linux OS, then you might know about like how to change your privilege from local user to root. So basically if you want to run some command with the root permission, you basically run sudo. Like suppose a command name is whois and you want to run whois with the help of sudo, so it will be executed as root. So sudo su set uid binaries and abnormal root access behavior. So all of that we are basically trying to identifying it in the sources in the log source, and for that we have this Splunk query. If you find something like this, then there might be chances like some attacker is trying to escalate their privileges. That makes it the privilege escalation attempts. After that, we have a query to identifying the potential DNS tunneling activity, right? So what is DNS tunneling? A type of a network based attack. So if you want to check out or want to identify the DNS tunneling, so you can use that query, and that query is basically looking for DNS traffic. The purpose of using this query to checking out all the records, repetitive txt records, long subdomain queries, high frequencies DNS queries, right? So if something appears, then we will again analyze it if it leads to a actual attack, or it is not actual attack, just a pointing out some random queries. I got a comment and Sai is saying like we should remember all these queries. No, you do not have to remember all these queries. You just have to understand it and write down somewhere. Whenever you need to use it, you can use it. The next query we have is to identifying the potential lateral movement using RDP. Previously, we talked about the lateral movement as a whole, but now if you have some specific network services like RDP, SSH or FTP, then you can use this query pointing out to checking the lateral movement attempts using RDP. So this detection focuses on unusual or unauthorized RDP connections inside the network. And what is RDP? RDP is a protocol, is a networking protocol in which basically you connect with some other devices with the help of RDP. So if you want to make a remote connection, then we will use RDP in Windows system. So if you want to check out if any unusual or unauthorized activity will be created using RDP in your network, then this query will help you, because uh, when a user or host initiate RDP sessions, so they don't normally access. So that indicates includes multiple RDP logins between non-related hosts, sudden RDP activity on compromised endpoints, logins using high privileges accounts, or RDP connections outside business hours. So they might be, these all the indications might be leads to the potential lateral movement attack. Then the query to identify the C2 traffic, like command and control traffic. So C2 is basically also used in lateral movement. So we are basically analyzing the network traffic pattern to use by some malware to communicate with your external attacker control server, some periodic low byte beaconing, consistent communications, right? So we will use this. Then the PowerShell Empire activity. So this detection tells for telltale artifacts of PowerShell. PowerShell, you know already, like the post exploitation frameworks like heavy base 64 encoded PowerShell commands, right? Obfuscated script blocks, downstream download string payloads, unusual parent processes launching. So we are checking all of that. Then the potential ransomware activity, checking if some file was modified, if uh, encryption behavior on any endpoints or your shared drives, right? So we are checking some of the extensions. Then the query to checking out, okay, that is repeated. So the query to check out the potential brute force attacks on web application. On web applications, if you want to check out some brute force on the endpoints like login, auth, or CMS logins like wp-login.php, WordPress login basically, API endpoint logins slash API slash login. So if any brute force attack, basically failed login attempts on these endpoints on your web applications, whatever CMS, whatever CDN or whatever services or web services or frameworks you are using, So if any attacker is trying to authenticate itself via brute force, so you will see multiple failed login attempts. So you need to check out that to identify if any account was compromised, any attacker is basically gaining some unauthorized access. So you need to check out in your logs of any post attempts, repetitive post attempts, failed logins, any 403 responses, right? And some password directories creations, or large credential lists, right? So these are the strong indicators. Then unauthorized access to sensitive file. In your system, there are some directories, there are some location which contain some sensitive data. Just like in Linux system, you have etc shadow, which contains all the information about your user's password, then etc passwd, which contains all the information about the user details. So if someone is trying, or if someone is accessed in your system somehow, or using any malicious activity, or using authorized credentials, so you are trying to check if some data was leaked or not, right? So you are checking if some unauthorized access attempts was created to sensitive files according to your structure. If you are using Windows, then you need to check the Windows file system. If you are using Linux, then Linux file system. If you are using web servers, then web servers critical files, sensitive files. So you can select the source type, and then the action is file read. If someone is trying to read your files, and then you can specify the file names. So here in the query, I specify the shadow and etc passwd file, because in Linux, according to Linux, those two files are important, but you can select more. So this detection is basically highlighting the users to process attempting to read, copy, modify, or delete some files located in sensitive paths like HR shares, source code repositories, backups, key stores that a normal user don't normally access. After that, lateral movement using SMB. SMB is a protocol which is known as service message block, which used to used in a network to access network services. So if the lateral movement happened using the SMB protocol, then you need to check out or run this query to detect the attack. Then brute force attack on SSH server, specifically for SSH. So we have to select out the source type, then the action, and then the source IP, and the failed password or failed authentication. These types of detection of spots you need to observe. Then the potential phishing attacks. So phishing attacks related to applications. So you need to check out the suspicious inbound emails. You are receiving some emails in your from your organization, or in your organization, with signs like new sender domain, or lookalike domain, or display names, or reply to mismatches, urgent payment loads, like someone is saying in the email, like this is urgent, you need to do that, you need to do fast, right? Something like that. Then command injection attacks on web servers. So command injection is like running some system commands to uh, exfiltrate the data. So if someone is trying to run that command using some input fields or parameters, then you need to identify if that kind of activity happened on your web server. So you need to run this particular Splunk query. In this query, you can also modify it according to your need. Something like what command you basically trying to observe. So see the second line of this. In this, I write the command of cat ls or dir, but you can add some more. The next is lateral movement using WinRM, right? So WinRM is like Windows remote management. So if lateral movement was happened using WinRM remote management, Windows remote management, so we can focus it on that. If some RCE was happened, like the command was executed remotely. So basically, attacker often abuses the well abuses this thing after gaining the well access of with valid credentials. So attackers include uses these WinRM connections between non-related host and something like that. Then the potential brute force attacks on FTP server. Similarly, this particular query helps to identify the brute force on a specifically FTP server. So that will be your query. Then the privilege escalation attempts on Windows system. So in Windows system, we need to check out some processes. So you can specify some processes names. Like in this particular query, I specify run as and then ps execute.exe, PowerShell execution.exe or run as. So you can add some more and check out if some privilege escalation was happened. See, if you are seeing those queries, these queries are basically made of on attacks. So attacks are limited: privilege escalation attacks, lateral movement attacks, or unauthenticated access. Basically, someone is downloading some files, data exfiltration, or launching phishing attacks. So Windows system, Linux system, using a specific service, using a specific port, using a specific IP, using a specific network devices. So according to that, we can modify or we can rewrite our queries. Then the weakening activity on a compromised host. So we are basically detecting some periodic or low volume network connection from a host that repeat with regular intervals, right, to the same external endpoints. Then the brute force attack on SSL server, similarly, just like FTP, you can use that. Then the data exfiltration over HTTP, right? If HTTP protocol was used for data exfiltration attempts, you can use this. We are searching for any zip file, any RAR file, any compressed file or zipping file extension. So you can use all of that. Then the lateral movement using WMI. So we are basically looking for any remote WMI execution and enumeration. Then the MS SQL servers. So any brute force activity on your SQL servers picking up with MS SQL, but MySQL, PostgreSQL, no SQL, you can use all of that also. Then privilege escalation using PowerShell. So PowerShell, if someone is using PowerShell to launch the privilege escalation or using PowerShell to create or improving their escalation, then we will use this query. Then brute force attacks on email account. For that, you need to check out the email based protocols like SMTP, POP, IMAP, or ActiveSync, Zero Auth. Then the lateral movement using RDP, brute force attacks on MS SQL servers on successful logins. So sometimes successful logins are also indicating some attack, because sometimes when you see successful logins, that doesn't mean a legitimate user is connecting with your server legitimately, but sometimes an attacker is also found some credential leak or through some credential leak or something like that. So they are making some successful logins. So you need to check out the successful logins also to see if the source IP is same, or if the source IP is coming from unusual port or unusual location. So you can check that out. And then the data exfiltration using FTP. So FTP is also used for data exfiltration, and we are basically checking that out. And then the lateral movement using SNB on successful connections. Previously we talked about the failed connections, then the successful connections. So these are the 19 queries, 90 queries we have for Splunk, but 10 more. So you can hopefully you will get that idea like why the Splunk queries are important. So these 10 are more. Query to identify the potential brute force on RDP, the brute force on web applications, the lateral movement using remote registry services, the privilege escalation on Linux system, the data exfiltration using DNS, and the lateral movement using SMB, the brute force on MS SQL failed login, then the data exfiltration over SMTP, and the lateral movement using NetBIOS or Telnet. So all these are the 100 important uh, Splunk queries you can use in your Splunk in your log analysis. When you are about to analyze logs, then you need those queries. If you are particularly using the Splunk, if you are not using that, if you are using anything like not Splunk, you are using IBM QRadar or Vaiju or any more open source tool, then you need to modify the query according to the UI of that tool. But Splunk is a market leading software, so that's why I use Splunk queries to show you the how you will analyze all the logs. In logs, basically the data sources will be important, like where you are receiving your data. So the data source will be important, and after that you can use it. So these are the 100 queries, and these slides will be uploaded on your drive shortly, so you can check that out. I think I uploaded uh, 20 day 23 slides to the resources drive. Let me check. So in the resources drive, you can check out. Yes, day 23 slides are uploaded, and day 24 and 25 is remaining. So I will upload those slides tonight. You can check that out. You can follow the session tracker as well. If you missed some sessions, or if you are not particularly able to attend it, then you can check day by day sessions using this session tracker list. You can check out the other playlist, other videos on the channel, which will help you in cybersecurity journey if you are into defensive or if you are into offensive part. So that will be for today, and when we connect again on Monday, we will talk about the next session on SOC 11, and after that, like only 5 sessions are remaining, so 2 or 3 will be according to the practical approach, and then one is QA, and one is about Wireshark. Let me show you the mind map also, like what we completed, what is remaining. So we are here. After the malware part, we used some of the uh, analysis of logs, right? And now I will have a topic on SOC templates and examples, how to tries an alert, and the Wireshark, the packet capture analysis, a case study, and then the final discussion. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. 7 to 8 sessions we have remaining. So we will not complete in 30. We will be finishing it on 32 or 33 sections. Okay. So with that note, I will finish today's session, and let we connect again on tomorrow, Monday, not tomorrow, Monday. So thank you everyone for joining it. If you enjoy, as always, make sure you like the video, gives a thumbs up, drop some comments. If you haven't subscribed it yet, make sure you subscribe and share this thing, share this series or the other videos of your channel on in your network, in your college groups, on your Telegram channels, so the others can also benefit. Do not forget to check out the important links which are available in the video description. Check them out. You will find a lots of useful data for your cybersecurity journey. With that note, take care everyone. Bye bye. See you on Monday.